The spacecraft drifted through the cold vacuum of space, gliding silently as it approached the unfamiliar planet. The stars shone brightly outside the windows, but it was the planet below that captured the attention of Captain Eric Thompson, the human explorer at the helm. He had been on many missions to distant moons and forgotten worlds, but this one felt different. This time, he wasn't just exploring for scientific knowledge. This time, he was here to make contact. A diplomatic mission to the planet Zorath 9 had been scheduled for months, and today was the day. The people of Zorath 9 had never met a human before, and it was a historic moment, one that could either foster peaceful relations or lead to unforeseen consequences. The Zorathians were an advanced race, with technology far beyond Earth's. Their empire stretched across vast regions of the galaxy, and their power was undeniable. But there were rumors, whispers of their queen, an enigmatic and powerful figure who ruled with an iron fist. Eric had heard stories of how the Zorathians had conquered countless worlds and how their queen was feared across the galaxy. Her beauty was said to be as mesmerizing as it was terrifying, and her presence commanded respect from all who encountered her. But despite the admiration and fear she inspired, no one truly knew what she was like. The ship's engines hummed gently as it neared the planet's surface. A sense of anticipation filled the cabin, and Eric's crew was silent, each person lost in their thoughts. They knew the importance of this moment. The human race had long dreamed of reaching out to other civilizations, but this encounter was different. The Zorathians were powerful, and their queen was the key to it all. If they could form an alliance with her, humanity would gain an ally that could change the course of history. But if they failed, if the queen saw humanity as weak, it could lead to war. Eric was nervous, though he didn't show it. He had dealt with plenty of difficult situations before: alien environments, hostile creatures, and political negotiations. But this was different. He could feel the weight of history on his shoulders. Today, he would meet the most feared being in the galaxy. As the ship touched down softly on the surface, Eric stood from his seat, adjusting his uniform. His heart raced in his chest, but he took a deep breath and reminded himself of the mission. He wasn't just representing himself, he was representing all of humanity. He was about to meet the alien queen, and he had to make a good impression. The doors of the ship opened with a hiss, and Eric stepped out onto the alien planet. The air was thick with the scent of something unfamiliar, like a mixture of spices and earth. He looked around at the landscape. Towering, jagged mountains stretched toward the sky, their peaks shrouded in mist. The ground beneath his boots was a soft, red-brown soil, and the sky overhead was a strange shade of purple. It was unlike anything he had ever seen before. A procession of Zorathians waited for him outside the ship. Their skin was smooth and a deep shade of violet, and their eyes glowed with a faint light, like two suns reflecting in the night. They were tall, their bodies slender but muscular, and their movements were graceful, almost otherworldly. But it was their eyes that stood out the most. There was an intensity to them, as if they could see straight through him. Eric's eyes were drawn to the figure standing at the front of the procession. She was taller than the rest, with long, flowing black hair that shimmered in the dim light. Her face was sharp, her features regal, and her gaze commanded attention. This was the queen, the one he had heard so much about. He took a step forward, his heart pounding in his chest, but before he could speak, she raised a hand. "Welcome to Zorath 9, she said, her voice low and powerful, like a deep echo in the cavern of his mind. "You must be Captain Eric Thompson. I am Queen Seraphina of the Zorathian Empire." Eric bowed slightly, trying to remain composed. "Your Majesty, it is an honor to meet you. I bring greetings from the people of Earth." The Queen's eyes softened for a moment, though there was still an air of authority about her. "The pleasure is mine, Captain, but there is something you should know before we continue." Eric raised an eyebrow. "What is that, Your Majesty?" Queen Seraphina glanced around at her people and then back at him. I am not what your kind expects me to be. Eric didn't quite understand what she meant, but before he could ask, the queen continued. I am feared throughout the galaxy. My face, my appearance is something that has caused many to cower. I know what they think of me. Eric was taken aback by her words. The stories he had heard had never mentioned anything like this. In every account, the queen was portrayed as this perfect, untouchable ruler. Beautiful, powerful, and above all, fearless. But now, standing before her, he realized that maybe there was more to the queen than anyone had ever let on. I know how you see me, she continued, her voice filled with a strange sadness. The others, your people, they must be terrified of my face. I have never been seen as beautiful, not in the way you would think. Eric blinked, surprised by the vulnerability in her voice. What do you mean, your majesty? Queen Seraphina looked away for a moment, her gaze drifting toward the horizon. I am feared because of my appearance. My people and those who have encountered me see my face and tremble. They call me a monster, a creature that should not exist. I have ruled my empire with strength and power, but at what cost? I have never known what it means to be seen for who I am, beyond the face that terrifies. Eric could hardly believe what he was hearing. The powerful, ruthless queen, the one who had conquered galaxies and stood as an unmovable force in the universe, was speaking about her insecurity, her self-doubt. He wasn't sure what to say. How could he respond to such honesty? Without thinking, he spoke the first words that came to mind. No, your majesty, you are the most beautiful in the galaxy. The queen turned to him, her eyes wide, as if she had never heard such words before. What? She asked, her voice almost a whisper. Eric took a deep breath, looking directly into her glowing eyes. I mean it. You are the most beautiful in the galaxy, not just in appearance, but in everything you've achieved. Your strength, your wisdom, your presence. It's unlike anything I've ever seen before. You are not a monster, your majesty. You are extraordinary. For a long moment, the queen said nothing. Eric wasn't sure if he had made a mistake, if his words had been too bold or misplaced. But then, slowly, the queen's expression softened. Her shoulders relaxed and she stepped closer to him. You really believe that? She asked softly, as if testing the sincerity of his words. Eric nodded. I do. You are not defined by what others see, but by who you are inside. You don't need to hide your true self. Not from me and not from anyone. The queen studied him for a moment, her eyes narrowing as though trying to decipher the truth in his words. Finally, she nodded, a small but genuine smile forming on her lips. Thank you, Captain. You have given me something I have never had before. Hope. Eric smiled back, feeling a strange connection to this alien ruler, one that transcended appearances and power. Maybe, just maybe, humanity had something to offer after all, something that could change not only the course of history, but the hearts of the most powerful beings in the galaxy. As they stood there, the queen and the human explorer in the heart of an alien world, neither could have known how much this moment would shape their future, and the future of all who lived in the galaxy. The air on Zoreth 9 seemed to carry a weight, thick with the unsaid things. Between the queen and the human, the two stood there, side by side, as the landscape stretched out before them. The jagged mountains, the strange purple sky, and the distant lights of the Zorathian city far below, they all felt so distant now. Eric had never expected to be standing here with the queen, not like this, not after hearing all the terrifying stories about her. The moment felt surreal. He had expected fear, or at least awe, in her presence. But instead, the queen had shown him something no one had ever seen before, a vulnerable side of her, one that even her own people likely never witnessed. The powerful monarch, the one who ruled with strength and unwavering authority, had a weakness, a doubt that she hid so well behind her fearsome image. But now, in her eyes, Eric saw something different. Hope. He wasn't sure what had changed her mind, or why his words had affected her so deeply. He wasn't a diplomat. He wasn't trained to handle matters of such gravity. Yet somehow, his simple, heartfelt response had pierced through the layers of her armor. The silence between them lingered for a moment longer before the queen spoke again, her voice softer than before. "I have ruled my people with strength, Captain," she began, still looking out at the alien horizon. "I have always been their symbol of power. My face, my presence, it commands respect. But what have I truly built? A kingdom built on fear, on dominance. The galaxy trembles before me, but none see me as I truly am. They see only the mask I wear, the face I cannot change." Eric didn't know how to respond to that. He wasn't a scholar of alien psychology. He didn't know the full history of the Zorathian people or the Queen's struggle. All he could do was stand there and listen. "You're not a monster, Your Majesty," he finally said, his words coming out with more certainty than before. "What you've built, the Empire, it's not just fear. It's also respect. Your people follow you because of the strength you've shown them, but they also see something more in you. Maybe they can't put it into words, but they follow you because they believe in you." The Queen turned to face him, her sharp, glowing eyes reflecting a depth of emotion Eric hadn't seen before. For the first time, she seemed to truly consider his words. "Do you think they believe in me, or do they simply fear what I could do to them?" Eric paused, his mind racing. "I think they believe in you because you've shown them what it means to be strong. But strength doesn't have to come from fear. It comes from understanding, from empathy, from being able to see beyond appearances. That's why you're different. That's why I'm here. You don't need to hide behind that mask anymore." The Queen looked at him for a long time, her gaze unwavering. She was searching for something, something beyond his words. Maybe she was looking for a reason to believe in herself again, to believe that she could change her own destiny. "I've never been told that before," she admitted quietly. "Not in all the years I've ruled. My people, they see me as their queen." "But I am more than just that title, aren't I?" Eric nodded. "Yes, you are." The words hung in the air between them. For a moment the Queen seemed lost in thought, her eyes far away. Eric wasn't sure if she was contemplating what he said or if she was simply processing everything. He didn't want to push her, but at the same time, he felt like he had opened a door she had never known existed. "Tell me, Captain," she said after a long pause, her voice soft but firm. "What do humans truly see when they look at me?" Eric hesitated. What could he possibly say to her? She had spent so much of her life thinking of herself as a terrifying figure, someone who ruled with an iron fist. How could he explain the complexities of human perception, of seeing someone not for their outward appearance but for what they represented? He took a deep breath and spoke honestly. I think humans would see strength in you. Not just the power of your empire, but the strength in your resolve, your ability to lead, your wisdom. We look at the challenges we face and see people like you as leaders, people who can inspire us to be better, to do more, to fight for what's right." The Queen's eyes softened as she listened to him. There was a slight tilt to her head, a gesture that was almost human. Her lips parted slightly, and for a moment, Eric thought she might say something. But instead, she turned away and gazed out toward the vast expanse of Zorath 9, as if contemplating the distance between them and the world she had created. "You know, Captain," she said after a while, "I have never truly understood humans. You are so different. You are fragile in some ways, but you also possess a strength that seems to grow from your very nature. I have seen your species fight against impossible odds, rise from nothing, and yet, you still care, you still have hope." Eric couldn't help but smile at her words. "Hope is something we're known for," he said softly. "It's what keeps us going. No matter how tough things get, we always find a way to keep fighting." The Queen turned back to him, her eyes searching his face. "I have always thought that hope was a weakness, but now I wonder if I was wrong." Her voice was filled with an unfamiliar softness, and Eric found himself wondering what it would be like if she truly embraced this new way of thinking. Could the Queen of Zorath IX, the mighty ruler who had shaped an empire with fear, truly change her view of the universe? Before Eric could respond, a Zorathian soldier approached them, bowing before the Queen. "Your Majesty, the Council awaits. They wish to speak with you regarding the human delegation." The Queen sighed, her shoulders sagging slightly. "Of course," she said, her voice regaining its usual authority. "I will be there shortly." The soldier bowed again and turned to leave, but the Queen's gaze lingered on Eric for a moment longer. "Thank you, Captain," she said, her voice quieter this time, "for showing me a side of myself I never knew existed." Eric nodded, feeling a sense of warmth spread through him. He didn't know what the future held for him or the Queen, but in that moment he realized something important. It wasn't just about making alliances or gaining power. It was about understanding each other, seeing each other for who they truly were, not for what the galaxy had made them out to be. "I'll be here when you're ready," Eric said, giving her a reassuring smile. The Queen gave him a small, almost imperceptible smile in return. "I'll remember that." With one last glance at him, she turned and walked toward the entrance of the palace, her regal figure disappearing into the shadows. Eric stood there for a moment, reflecting on the strange turn of events. He had come to this planet expecting to meet a ruthless, untouchable ruler, but instead he had encountered a woman, a leader, who was just as uncertain about herself as anyone else. And maybe, just maybe, that was the key to building something lasting between their two races. As he walked back to the ship, Eric couldn't help but think about what the Queen had said. Hope is something we're known for. For the first time, he truly believed that the Zorathians might one day see that hope too. The days that followed Eric's encounter with Queen Seraphina were filled with tension, but also with a new sense of possibility. Eric found himself spending more and more time with the Queen, their conversations growing longer and deeper as the days passed. Despite the pressing matters of diplomacy, the Queen seemed to want to talk to him, to learn more about the human race, its hopes, its flaws, its resilience. Eric had expected to be treated like an outsider, a foreigner on a distant world, but instead, he had become something more. An unlikely confidant to a ruler who had spent her entire life alone, surrounded by people who were more afraid of her than anything else. It wasn't long before the Queen invited Eric to a private meeting in her chambers, away from the prying eyes of her advisors and council. He wasn't sure what to expect, but when he arrived, he was greeted not by a queen on a throne, but by a woman standing by the window, looking out at the distant city below. Her back was straight, her posture regal, but her expression was softer than Eric had ever seen it. "You're early," she said without turning around, her voice tinged with amusement. Eric stepped into the room, feeling a strange sense of unease. "I thought I'd arrive on time," he said with a smile. "Didn't want to keep you waiting." The Queen finally turned, a faint smile on her lips. "I don't mind waiting. It gives me time to think." Eric couldn't help but notice the sadness in her eyes. She had always carried herself with such power and authority, but now she seemed different. As if something within her had shifted, something that made her more human, more approachable. "About what?" he asked, his curiosity piqued. "I've been thinking about everything," she replied, her voice quieter now. "About my people, about what kind of ruler I've been. What kind of ruler I want to be." Eric watched her for a moment, wondering what had brought on this change. "And what have you decided?" The Queen took a deep breath as though gathering her thoughts. "I've ruled my people with strength, with fear, and with control, but what have I truly built? A kingdom where everyone cowers before me, where no one dares to question me. A kingdom built on fear is not a kingdom worth having." Eric stepped closer, his voice gentle. "You're more than just a ruler, Your Majesty. You're a person with hopes and dreams just like anyone else. You've built an empire, yes, but now you have the chance to build something better." The Queen turned her gaze away, her eyes clouded with uncertainty. "But I've lost so much." I've sacrificed so much to keep my empire intact, and now I don't even know if I'm strong enough to change it." Eric's heart ached for her. He could see the weight of her words, the burden of leadership pressing down on her. She had spent her entire life wearing a mask of strength, but now, with the walls starting to come down, she seemed fragile, vulnerable in a way that was almost unrecognizable. "You don't have to change everything all at once," Eric said softly. "Change starts with small steps. With understanding. You've already made one huge change by letting go of your fear and showing your true self." The queen looked at him, her expression conflicted. "But what if my people won't accept me? What if they see me as weak, as someone who cannot lead them?" Eric shook his head. "Your people have followed you because they respect you, and respect isn't born out of fear. It's born out of trust. Trust that you'll lead them with fairness, with integrity, and with a vision for the future." The queen's gaze softened, and for a moment, Eric thought he saw a flicker of hope in her eyes. "You really believe that, don't you?" He nodded, his voice steady. "I do." They stood there for a moment, the silence between them filled with an understanding that neither of them had expected to find. Eric wasn't sure what the queen was thinking, but he could feel that something had changed within her. The walls that had once separated them were beginning to crumble piece by piece. Finally, the queen spoke again, her voice barely above a whisper. "I don't know what the future holds, Captain, but I think I want to find out." Eric smiled, feeling a sense of warmth spread through him. "Then let's find out together." The days that followed were filled with quiet moments of reflection and conversation. The queen's advisors were puzzled by her sudden change in demeanor, but Eric could tell that she was no longer the same person she had been when he first arrived on Zorath 9. She was more open, more willing to listen, and more willing to question the system she had spent her life upholding. One afternoon, as they sat in the royal gardens, the queen turned to Eric with a thoughtful expression. "Tell me more about humans," she said, her tone curious. "What makes your species so resilient?" Eric considered her question for a moment. "We're not perfect," he said slowly. "We're flawed just like everyone else, but we have this drive, this need to keep going even when everything seems lost. We find strength in each other, in our communities, in the bonds we share." The queen nodded, her eyes reflecting something that was both sad and wistful. "I have never known what that kind of strength feels like." Eric looked at her, his gaze softening. "Maybe you're starting to. Maybe that's why you're changing. You're learning that you don't have to be alone anymore." For the first time, the queen's smile reached her eyes. It was small, but it was there, a flicker of something new, a hope perhaps, or a sense of possibility. "Do you think it's possible to start over?" she asked quietly. Eric didn't hesitate. "I think it's possible to build something new, something better. It won't be easy, and it won't happen overnight, but it's worth trying." The queen looked out over the garden, her expression thoughtful. "I want to believe that. I really do." In the days that followed, the queen began to take more active steps toward change. She met with her council, not as a ruler who demanded obedience, but as a leader who sought input and collaboration. She began to listen to the concerns of her people, to learn from them rather than simply impose her will. It wasn't easy, and there were many obstacles along the way, but Eric could see the queen's transformation unfolding before him. She wasn't perfect, and the journey ahead would be long and difficult, but there was something undeniable about the change taking place. The queen was no longer the figurehead of an empire built on fear. She was becoming the leader of a new era, one where empathy, understanding, and cooperation could replace fear and division. As the days passed, Eric found himself feeling more and more at home on Zorath 9. He had come to this planet as an outsider, a visitor, but now he felt like he was part of something much larger. The Queen's willingness to embrace change, to learn from humanity, had sparked a shift not only in her, but in the very fabric of the Zorathian Empire. And as the days turned into weeks, Eric began to realize that this wasn't just a diplomatic mission. It wasn't just about building alliances or negotiating terms. This was something much more profound, something that could change the course of history for both humanity and the Zorathians. Together, they were building something new. And for the first time, Eric felt hopeful about the future. Weeks passed on Zoreth 9, and with each passing day, the changes within the Queen became more apparent. The once imposing and distant ruler was now a more approachable leader, someone who actively engaged with her people and showed a willingness to listen. She still commanded respect, but now it was through admiration rather than fear. Eric had been by her side throughout this journey, a quiet observer of the transformation taking place. He had always thought that he was here on a simple diplomatic mission, but as the days wore on, he began to realize that this was more than just politics. It was about something deeper, something more meaningful. It was about the possibility of building something lasting, a new path for two very different civilizations, built on trust, understanding, and cooperation. The Queen, once so sure of her power and her place in the galaxy, was now questioning everything. And Eric was beginning to understand that, just as humanity had its flaws and its strengths, the Zorathians had theirs. They were not an invincible empire. They were a people struggling to find balance, just as humanity had. One day, as Eric and the Queen sat together in the royal gardens, she turned to him, her eyes filled with determination. "I have made my decision," she said, her voice steady and confident. Eric raised an eyebrow. "What decision?" "I will address my people," she said, a glimmer of resolve in her eyes. "I will speak to them not as their queen, but as one of them. I will tell them the truth about who I am and about the path I wish for us to take." Eric's heart skipped a beat. This was a huge step, one that could either cement her new approach or set her back. He knew the risks. There were factions within the Zorathian Empire that still believed in the old ways, fear, dominance, and unquestioning obedience. They wouldn't welcome this change, but if anyone could convince them, it was her. "You're sure about this?" Eric asked quietly. The Queen nodded. "Yes, it's time to let go of the past and move forward. I have to show my people that we don't have to rule with fear. We can lead with compassion, with understanding. That is the future I want for us." Eric smiled, a sense of pride swelling within him. He had seen her change before his eyes, and now she was taking the ultimate step. "I believe in you, your majesty. I think your people will believe in you too." The Queen stood, her expression resolute. "Then I will do it. I will speak to them." The following day, the Queen gathered her council and the leaders of the various factions within the empire. It was a momentous occasion, and Eric was there, standing quietly at the back of the room, watching as the Queen prepared to address them. The grand hall was filled with the hum of conversation as the Zorathian leaders gathered. They spoke in low tones, casting curious and sometimes skeptical glances at Eric, who had now become an unexpected fixture in their world. The Queen, standing tall at the front of the room, looked every bit the ruler she had been, strong, poised, and regal. But today, she wasn't the same as she had been in the past. Today, she was something new. She cleared her throat, and the room fell silent. All eyes turned to her, and for a brief moment, Eric could see the uncertainty in her eyes. But then, as if drawing strength from the very air around her, the Queen spoke. "My people," she began, her voice calm but firm. "For too long I have ruled you with an iron fist. I have demanded obedience, and I have used fear to maintain control. I have done so because I believed it was the only way to protect our empire, but I was wrong." The room was still. No one moved, no one breathed. Eric could feel the tension in the air, as if everyone was holding their collective breath, waiting for the Queen to continue. "I have spent my life hiding behind the mask of power," she said, her voice growing stronger with each word. "I thought that to lead, I had to be untouchable, unyielding. But in truth, leadership is not about strength alone. It is about understanding. It is about listening. It is about seeing your people not as subjects to be controlled, but as individuals to be valued. Eric watched as the Queen's gaze swept across the room, meeting the eyes of each leader and council member. There was a mixture of surprise, confusion, and curiosity in their expressions, but there was also something else, a flicker of hope. Could it be that they were beginning to understand? I stand before you today not as a ruler who demands loyalty out of fear, she continued, but as a leader who seeks to build a future where we work together, where we trust each other, and where we value the lives of our people above all else. The Queen paused for a moment, allowing her words to sink in. She had been speaking for only a few minutes, but already Eric could feel the shift in the room. There was a growing sense of tension, yes, but it was a different kind of tension now. It wasn't fear. It was the tension of a people who had been raised to believe one thing, and who were now being asked to consider something entirely new. I know this will not be easy, she said, her tone more personal now. I know there are those among you who have grown accustomed to the old ways, who believe that strength must come from fear. But I ask you to consider this. What kind of future do we want for ourselves? A future built on fear, or one built on trust and cooperation? The room was silent for a long time after she finished speaking. Eric held his breath, waiting for the reactions that were sure to come. He could hear the whispers beginning to ripple through the room, the murmurs of surprise, confusion, and even doubt. But there was also something else, a spark, a flicker of something that hadn't been there before. Finally, one of the council members, a tall, muscular Zorathian man with dark purple skin and piercing yellow eyes, stepped forward. His name was Commander Zarek, a powerful figure in the Empire who had always supported the old ways. "You speak of change, Your Majesty," he said, his voice steady and measured. "But change is dangerous. It is unpredictable. Our empire has flourished because of our strength, our ability to control, to dominate. Are you suggesting that we throw all of that away?" The Queen looked at him, unflinching. "I am not suggesting that we abandon strength. Strength is important. But strength that is based on fear is not true strength. It is fragile. It can be easily broken. But strength based on trust, on respect, that is the kind of strength that can endure." Zarek studied her for a long moment. The room was still, and everyone seemed to be waiting for his response. Finally, he spoke. "You ask us to trust in something we have never known," he said, his tone softer now. "But perhaps you are right. Perhaps it is time for something new." The room fell into silence again, and Eric could see the uncertainty in the faces of the other council members. They were all thinking, processing, trying to understand what the Queen had said and what it meant for their future. It wasn't an easy decision, and Eric knew that there were many more challenges to come. But this moment was a turning point. And then, to Eric's surprise, another council member, a woman named Ambassador Kayla, stepped forward. She had always been a quiet but strong presence in the Queen's court, and Eric had seen her nodding along with the Queen's words. "I have lived through both fear and respect," Kayla said, her voice calm but firm. "And I can tell you that fear only holds us for so long. Respect, on the other hand, can build something far stronger. I am willing to follow you, Queen Seraphina. I believe in this new vision." A ripple of murmurs spread through the room, and for the first time since the Queen had started speaking, Eric saw something incredible: agreement. More and more of the council members were nodding, exchanging looks of understanding. And then Zarek spoke again, his voice much softer than before. "I may not fully understand this change, but I respect your decision, Your Majesty. I will support you." The Queen nodded, her expression grateful. "Thank you, Zarek, and thank you to all of you." Eric felt a weight lift from his shoulders as the tension in the room seemed to dissipate. The Queen had done it. She had spoken the truth, and while it hadn't been easy, it had been necessary. And now she had the support of her people, her true people, not the ones who feared her but the ones who respected her. As the meeting came to an end, Eric found himself standing at the back of the room, a small smile on his face. The Queen had made history today, and so had humanity. They had shown the Zorathians that strength didn't come from fear, but from unity, from trust, and from understanding. The journey was far from over, but Eric knew that they were on the right path. Together, humanity and the Zorathians would build something better, something that transcended old ways and created a future of hope. And as the Queen walked toward him, her posture still regal but now filled with something more, something deeper, he knew that the future was not just hers to shape. It was theirs together.